relevant in today's episode. So let's get on with it. Let me ask you, how do you see it? If you're going through it, what's happening? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Because it's interesting when you look at a subject like loss, there's many facets that come into play. It's not just emotional. There's the mental health issues that come within that, and how you see things and how you perceive it. We all distort things. We all distort the truth. How many times have you ever done this where you've blown it out of proportion in your mind? You've had a row with someone, or someone's upset you, or something has happened and it's just got out of proportion in your mind and it just overwhelms you. So I want you to think about it. What loss means for you, and how you deal with it, and your perception of that. Because I've changed mine completely. And I want to give you two takes on this, because something has happened to me, which I'll explain in a minute. And I had a before and an after take on this. Prior to this particular event, I would have had a different view on what loss meant and how to deal with it. And this gives you a sort of indication. My thoughts on things have always been, well, it can never be as bad as this. So if something happened, I would try and get someone to see that it could have been worse. It could be worse. Even if they lost their mother, like I did, I would look at it and say, well, it could have been worse. And it's quite a cold way of dealing with it, isn't it? If you think about it, it's quite a, but it worked for me for many, 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 many years. When my grandmother died, or when, someone close to me died, it was, I go into my shell. I'd deal with it internally. I would not speak about it publicly. It would be personal, and I wouldn't certainly talk to my close family and friends about it. I would ask them to talk about it, and I would try and get them to see that it's not as bad as they think it is. And what's coming up inside me at the moment is, it was pretty cold. And that was how I'd been molded all my life. It's funny. I hear people talking about Prince Harry at the moment, and we should have a stiff upper lip and shut up and not talk about it, right? And that was pretty much what I used to do. No, don't talk about it. Don't, just get on with it. Move on. Find a way forward. After the event, which is pretty significant, I might add, I've got a completely different take. So that leads me on to an important part of the process of loss. And it's your perception on what's really going on at this moment in time. What does this mean? What is the consequences of what's happened? Because they're going to be, and it's interesting because it's easy to talk about it after the event. And they talk about certain stages of grief. And looking back now, this is going to take a big chunk of your life to get over, i.e., immediately. A big chunk of your life. It's not going to happen in a day. It's not going to happen in a week. It's not going to happen in a month. It's going to be a process that's going to take time, and that time is important. It's embracing the fact that this is going to have an impact on your attitude towards a lot of things. It could even be that impactful, it changes the direction of your life. And so it's looking at it from sort of looking down. Don't look at it from someone else's perspective, but look at it down on your life as if. So, if you've seen a bomb go off and it ricochets, the energy. It's not just in one direction; it's multiple directions, because this could have an impact on things that have happened in the past. It will drag something up that happened in the past. It brings something closer to you in the future, because it makes you focus on something that you wouldn't have possibly thought about. So it's appreciating the magnitude of what has just happened. Because I can tell you now, we all deal with it differently. But when we have that one thing just to grasp and say, okay, I'm overwhelmed, but I need to have an appreciation for what's just happened. Everybody has adversity at some stages in their life. And there was a quote, I think it was from Tony Robbins, and I use it regularly. I nicked it off him. The quality of your life is in direct proportion to your ability to deal with bad news and adversity. Now, adversity comes in and bad news comes in all different stages or different levels. It can be bad news from your car's broken down through to, the worst thing in the world that could potentially happen. And last year, I lost my daughter. And as you can imagine, that adversity was pretty high up there. And how do you come back and how do you deal with that? So someone who's lost their loved ones during COVID, I know what that feels like. And people can, and it's easy because I'll use my own example to try and give a little insight to how I deal with that, because you can see I'm still dealing with it now, because it was only in October last year. And it's easy to go down the rabbit hole of blame. It's easy to go down the rabbit hole of anger, the injustice of whatever happened. It's easy because we want to blame or point our finger and say it's their fault, or if they hadn't have done this, if they hadn't have allowed this, or if it's easy to do that. But that doesn't change anything. The result is still the same. There's still loss. And so instead of blame, I looked for, and this sounds mad, really, something positive from it. How can you find something positive from someone passing? You might be screaming at me now if you've lost someone and thinking, how stupid and ridiculous is that? But let me explain. My daughter took her own life. And straight away, I actually blame myself to start with, because about 10 days prior to her passing, I'd had a warning that she was quite close to suicide, and her flatmate asked me to, you know, come and get her from her flat. So I drove over to see her, and she was telling me all the reasons why she didn't want to live. And I'm not going to go into full details because that's personal to me. And so I brought her home to my house, and we spent 10 days together here. And when I took her back to her flat, we were regularly texting and talking. And I thought I'd got her to a good place. And she was living with a flatmate, and there'd been a couple and they'd split up. So I asked the flatmate to leave so she could have a little bit of space, and she didn't have that stress of living together with someone, a partner that you no longer was with, because that must have been difficult and strenuous, very stressful and not easy. And that was effectively compounding the issue that she had. So I asked the flatmate to leave, and then when I took her back to her flat, she was in a better place than when I picked her up. And I said to her, "Do you want me to help, sort the flat out?" And because her flatmate had gone and left some rubbish and stuff. And we got her sorted out, and the flat was settled, and there was a marked improvement in her demeanor and her attitude. And we were having really good conversations, really good texts, and I thought everything was okay. And then bang, she'd done it, and she blagged me. And then I thought, she was telling me everything was okay, so blame came on my shoulders. I let her go back to her house, her flat. So it's my fault. So I realized that had I not let her go back, I could have prevented it. I was fooling myself, really, because it wasn't my fault. And when the police had advised me that the police officer told me that she'd left letters and she'd been very meticulous in her passing. So she had every intention of going back and doing what she was doing, and every intention of actually giving her dad the impression that she was okay. So when we got the letters, which was about a week later, because the police wouldn't allow or release them to start with, because they treated it suspiciously, just in case anyone had helped her, assisted her. And eventually we got the letters, and then I realized once I got the letters that my perception of this was completely wrong, because she'd detailed in her letters why she'd done what she'd done, and the way she did it. And please don't blame yourself, Dad, because I lied to you. I let you think everything was okay. And I took solace from that letter, because the letter had a detailed explanation of a lot of things, more so how she saw our relationship and the gravitas that she put on that, which was really important to me, because very few people get to understand how much their kids feel about their parents, how they really feel. And I had that in a letter from her. And that's what I'm talking about taking something positive from that. I read the letter every day, 6 pages long. I usually cry when I read it. And there's such comfort in that, even though it's so sad. And I took comfort from the fact that she was so meticulous about what she did. The fact she did it in a way where it was organized and there was no stress. She passed peacefully. I'm not going to discuss how she did it, but it was probably the best way, if I could explain, to euthanasia. And I took comfort from that. And I went to a meeting for survivors of bereaved suicide, and realized again quickly how fortunate I was. Not fortunate I'd lost my daughter, But fortunate I wasn't in the position that other people were in, where they had no explanation, they had no notes, they had nothing. How do you take positivity from that? Because every circumstance is different, but you have to find it. You have to find something. And this whole situation brought up a lot of past grief that I hadn't dealt with. My mother died when I was 3, and I had all that come right up, and it exploded. But that passing many years ago, I took positivity from that, which was it allowed me to stand on my own 2 feet as a young baby, a young child, living without being tied to my mother's apron strings, which sounds bizarre, but actually gives me the gifts I've got today of skills that I use today from all them years ago. So when I look back at Zoe's passing, I take away from this tragic situation the beauty of my relationship with her. I found that within her passing. I wouldn't have known that otherwise, and I can take that along with me. And I always, I say always because it's only happened to me once, so it's not always, but I say once, losing your child. I then look at life so preciously. You can't take for granted. So I've got another daughter. I've got a granddaughter. It then enables me to cherish that even more than that I probably would have done. And I thought I did cherish things. We all do. We all think we've got, we make the most of relationships. Boy, does this make you realize that we need to double down and make sure that I see every relationship, and we're not talking about just my daughter, my granddaughter, my wife, but my friends, my wider community. Because again, once this happened, you get to know who your friends are. Some people want to walk on the other side of the street, but the ones that really care are there, listening, never questioning. You realize how important they are in your life. And when we break it down, and again, I don't want to cheapen this, because you saw earlier how I responded. This is something I'm not going to get over. And I think that's something that if I had to give anyone any advice on losing someone where it's so raw, don't try and get over it. There's no point. You're not going to get over it, but you're going to carry it. And it's how do you carry it? How do you carry it forward with the rest of your life and being able to function normally? Because when something so dramatic happens, so traumatic, I should say, not dramatic, traumatic, it's learning to live with it. It's seeing the beauty in what was there before and what's left afterwards. It's carrying that with you and enabling the grief to not consume you, but allow the grief to pass through you. Because grief is different for everybody. Grief is, I can tell you now, I didn't expect, if you'd asked me before, if one of your kids passed, of course I'd say I'd be upset, I'd be mortified, I never expected the response that my body had. I had no control over it, no control. I hear people about they sob uncontrollably. up until that point, I'd never known what that was like. And that's the grief coming through me. It's coming up through me, and I'm allowing it to do whatever it needs to do, take whatever path it takes. I've got skills. I can change the way I feel like that. I've got techniques that I've learned from some very influential people that you would probably know, who are fantastic at being able to get you to change the way you feel in any moment. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to change the way I feel. I want to embrace it. I want to let it flow through me. And if it's painful, it's painful. But there's a difference, right? And I want to leave you this because this is important, really important. Pain is part of life. You're going to experience pain. If it doesn't matter how long you live, you're going to experience pain in some way, shape, or form. I'm not talking about physical pain. I'm talking about emotional pain. It's part of life. Suffering is optional. Now, we're going to suffer when something happens, and we can stay in that suffering if we wish to. It's a choice. Believe me, it's a choice. But you can either grow with it and find something to take away that you can hold on to. And one of the things I hold on to in my letters from my daughter, it's stated in there, if anyone can take a shit situation and turn it into something worth fighting for, that's my dad. And I repeat that mantra every single day, multiple times during the day. And since I've repeated that mantra, I've felt slightly differently. It doesn't take the pain away. It just means I won't suffer so much because I'm finding something within that that's worth fighting for. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things I do daily now, this is not just daily, I probably do this 20, 30 times a day. I took something special from Zoe's letter that I say to myself every day, if anyone can take a situation and turn it into something worth fighting for, that's my dad. And that has given me hope. That has given me something to cling to, something to hold on to that's bigger than the grief that I'm feeling. So if I can give you any advice, if you are suffering right now, is to look at your loved one. Did they have a saying that was special? Did they do something that was a little bit quirky, a little bit different, that made them who they are? And hold on to that. Hold on to that. Remember it. Replay it. If it was a saying, repeat that saying continuously. To start with, I said that saying the first day I did it was 31st of October, 2022. And I must have said it to myself 250 times during that day. And that helped me. That really gave me something to hold on to that I could remember Zoe by. And that's what we need to do. And people used to say to me, yeah, remember the good times, and all that sort of nonsense. It's important, but find something unique, special, something they did, maybe when they were younger or maybe in the last few months of their life, something that you can cling to, hold on to, take with you, move forward with you, something you can never have to put down. And that will make you, I'm not going to say it's going to make you feel any better, but it'll make you have that sense of purpose of it wasn't in vain. There's something bigger than what she's left behind. Something greater than the event itself. Something special that I can carry with me for the rest of my life.